I hear a lot of clients that come to me and say, Andrew, I want to open up a second location. And I say, okay, why do you want to do that? And then they say, well, my location isn't making enough money right now. It turns out it's actually not making any money at all. And they're like, but if I had a second location, I'd have more money, I'd have more free time, and my business would be better. And what I always tell people is that two unprofitable locations do not make a profitable one. If you couldn't leave for 6 weeks without something going wrong, you're not ready to open up another location. There's another saying that I use is a lot of people scale from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. Because once you get to a certain level of scale and you scale beyond the skill set that you have, you end up in a place where you can't manage everything yourself. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, multi-unit location owner for almost 20 years, and now we help restaurant owners increase their sales, increase their profits, and increase their free time so they can spend more of it with their family and growing their business and expanding and creating a massive empire that will dominate the world for years to come. Just kidding, but our topic today is actually all about purchasing and buying restaurants. So as you want to grow into that little empire that we talked about, here are some things that you are going to need to know in order to do that. So I have opened restaurants, like starting from a empty shell and building them out. I've also purchased businesses. So we're going to dive into a few of the things that I wish I could have done differently or would have done differently to get us better results. So the first question I want to start with is, if you are a current restaurant owner, the first question I have for you is, are you actually ready to have a second location? Now, the reason I ask this is because I thought I was ready, but I was not at all ready to make the jump from one location to two, and then from 2 until 3, and then 3 until 4. I really overestimated my own abilities, and it took me a long time to repair and fix what I wish I would have known before I did it. So I'll give you a perfect example. So I hear a lot of clients that come to me and say, Andrew, I want to open up a second location. And I say, okay, why do you want to do that? And then they say, well, my location isn't making enough money right now. It turns out it's actually not making any money at all. And they're like, but if I had a second location, I'd have more money, I'd have more free time, and my business would be better. And what I always tell people is that two unprofitable locations do not make a profitable one. If you do not know how to make your existing location work, if it is not working extremely well, if you're not already at the peak profits that you should be, if it's not running without you, if you still have to be there day to day, if you couldn't leave for 6 weeks without something going wrong, you're not ready to open up another location. Now, that means that a lot of people won't be able to open up new locations as fast as they want to, but I can promise you this, is that when you do, it'll be far better and your bank account will thank me, because there's another saying that I use is a lot of people scale from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. Because once you get to a certain level of scale and you scale beyond the skill set that you have, you end up in a place where you can't manage everything yourself. Your sales start to slip, your service starts to slip, so therefore your profitability starts to slip, and you don't have the cash to weather that storm with 3 locations, and pretty soon you end up either selling, downsizing, closing, or just going bankrupt altogether. And I've seen this pattern too many times. Like, I wish I could say I could count it on one hand the number of times I've seen this pattern. I've seen this 30, 40 times, right? And the common denominator is that they think they're ready, but they're not, because they don't know what they're getting into. That's like saying, well, I can run one restaurant, so I'm going to be able to run 2, right? People just think that, when the reality is far different. And so I want to make sure that I educate everyone on that first. So if you're looking at opening up another location or buying another restaurant, you have to make sure that your profits are already solid. You already have a restaurant that runs without you. Because what happened for me, I went into my second location and my first one slipped. And my second location wasn't making a whole lot of money off the bat. Sometimes it takes time to build. I didn't really know how to do proper openings at that point. So I opened without the success that I would later with the things that I've learned. But I ended up in a situation where we were losing money at the new location, and the one that was making money before stopped making money because I had left it and I didn't have the proper management team in place. The manager I put in place wasn't doing the job that I wanted, and I was stuck working 60, 80 hours a week at the new location, so I couldn't check in and monitor stuff. And so pretty soon I had 2 locations that neither of which were doing well. So like, how did that benefit me? It didn't. It actually just created more stress, and it took me a longer time to turn that around than I otherwise would have. So first question is, are you ready to open up a second location? And I'm pretty sure that I've already covered that in another podcast, so I don't want to go too deep into that today. But check out that podcast and take a listen because it has lots of information specifically on opening up a new location. So now let's walk into purchasing a new location. Let's say that you're buying an existing business. Let's say you own a pizza restaurant and there's another pizza restaurant that's up for sale and you want to convert it into your concept. So let me walk through the things that you should do in order to make sure it's successful. So number one, just taking this from my experience, when I bought my first business, I walked in and they had an offer on the table. I said, hey, I want X amount of dollars for it. I said, okay, sweet. That sounds good. Can you send me like some financials? And they were like, sure. So he gave me a sheet of paper and I looked at it and it had yearly figures on it. And the yearly figures, I should have known something was up because now that I'm remembering it, the phone bill was like $8 for the entire year, which obviously is not true. Like basically what happened is just was made up on like an Excel sheet and just put a bunch of random numbers in there. And I was like, oh man, it says that this place generates like over 100,000 in profit per year. Man, I'm going to be loaded. This is going to be great. And so I was just so excited and I was young and naive. And so what I didn't know to ask for is I didn't know to ask for either audited financials or at least tax return filings and payroll reports, like just anything that could back up the information that they were saying. So I didn't have any of that accurate data. I didn't know to look for it. So I didn't know to look for it. So I didn't have the financials. And I just believed what I was given. So that was my number one mistake, because had I known what I eventually learned in running the business, I definitely wouldn't have paid what I paid for it, right? It was not worth the amount I paid, but I only paid it out of naivety. And so that's one thing you need to do is look for financials that correlate with the tax returns or are audited, or just we need to see something that actually shows how much money is going into the bank account, how much is coming out, that kind of stuff. All right, now, next question on it is you need to be able to assess that business and say, hey, based on the way it's running right now, knowing the numbers that I do, can I improve on this? Because it's one thing to buy a business that isn't doing well, but if you can't do any better, then why would you buy it, right? So you want to make sure that the numbers they're putting up, you can do better. So one of the examples I had from when I opened up a brand new location, I was doing some competitor scouting and I noticed that the restaurant that I was going to be opening up beside, their service was terrible. There was like dust everywhere. It was dirty and they were still lined up to the door at their peak period. And I'm like, man, if the customer service is crap, the product's crap, and it's not even clean and stuff is run down, like, man, I'm going to kill this place. And so sure enough, that became my busiest location because I knew there was already people that were there. I had a very similar product to what they served. And so I went in there and I just crushed them, which was I don't want to say a lot of fun, but it kind of was a lot of fun. So, but the thing is, I knew I could do better. So that made total sense for me to go there because they already had demand for the product, the same type of product that I have. I knew we were going to be busy and then we could win customers over from our competitors. I just knew that was going to happen. So when you're looking at a business, you want to know, hey, can I massively improve on what's already going on here? Because you want to pay a lower price based on where the business is now. But if you can do better, that's where you're going to get your arbitrage. That's where you're going to get the value you can add to the business and how you're going to be able to take it from where it is to where you want it to go, right? So that's one thing. Now, when you're buying a business too, you also need to, this sounds simple, but you need to look at the equipment because a lot of people say, oh, it's got all the equipment in it. Yeah, but how old is the equipment? When is that going to be replaced? Let's face it, things aren't made the way they used to be. I remember when I bought my location, I had this one, it was like a sandwich table that lasted 20 years. It was the same one from when this business was opened. And I remember the day I took over because I took over right around the 10-year mark. And I remember buying a 3-door stand-up freezer. And what's funny is that the 3-door freezer died before that sandwich table died, even though it was twice as old. They made things differently in the past. So the equipment now is not built to last. So just understand that. So there's going to be equipment costs. And so when you're purchasing the business, I mean, at the end of the day, you need to be looking at the assets and saying, okay, is it worth it? You also need to be looking at, I talked about this on a previous podcast about the EBITDA multiple, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So you're looking at that, and realistically, like between 3 and 5% 3 and 5 times is a good number. So let's say they make $100,000 a year in their EBITDA. You want to be offering them $300,000, $400,000, max $500,000. So that's a good range to be in. But obviously, if someone's selling it, especially in the restaurant business, they're usually selling it because they can't run it or do it well enough. So in that case, they may not even be showing profit. They might not even be doing anything. And so that's where you can come in and offer them a lot less. They might want $100,000. Well, hey, offer them 50, because unfortunately, distressed sellers just need to sell it and they are willing to take whatever they can get. So that is an opportunity for you. So obviously your job as the buyer is to buy it for the lowest amount possible. And your job as the seller is to sell it for as high as amount of possible. And so realistically, when you're buying a restaurant, you want to go in and let's face it, if you're looking at it and you're like, man, like there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be replaced. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the leaseholds. Like there's going to need to be some renos. There's going to be a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So like realistically, you should be okay to walk away from an offer if you have a lower offer and they don't accept it. So be okay with that. Be okay with walking away from the deal, because your job isn't, like, let's face it, there's other restaurants you can buy. Like there's no shortage of restaurants to purchase at the moment, right? If you're going to buy an existing business. So that's one thing. So that's a really key thing to understand. And one thing I'm always looking at when we're looking at buying restaurants and stuff like that, I'm almost always looking for what's the least amount of work I can possibly do. So if it's already set up to be a pizza shop and I'm a pizza shop owner and all the equipment's already there, well, great. It's virtually turnkey. I'm just going to have to do some painting, going to have to do some like menu changes, or whether it's like the front sign, you're going to need to change that. So like predominantly all of that stuff's there. So great places to find businesses to buy is even talking to landlords who have places that have went dark or are near there. Then you could scoop it up for a lot less. There's actually a client we just helped through this not too long ago. I think the asking price was $100,000 and they got it for $40,000. And they also got, because it was a franchise, they actually included in the deal getting rent abatements for, I think, 6 months or something like that. There's a lot of stuff they worked into the deal because they really wanted to move this business and keep it open. So understand when you're in the power seat of that dynamic, right? And be prepared to walk away. It's totally okay, right? One thing I have found is that it's always better to not make a deal than to make the wrong deal. Just one thing I want you guys to stick in your heads as you're talking about this. Okay, so we talked about equipment. Now let's talk about rent, because what's important to understand is when you're renting a premises, one thing you want to do is make sure that the rent actually makes sense. And so what I mean by that is it could be in a great location, but if the rent is way too high, you're never going to be able to make your maximum profit from it. So always be looking at what the rent is, and based on what you see there and what you could potentially do with the business, is that number going to make sense? Because the rent is the one, like the location on the rent are things that you cannot really change, right? So you've got to make sure they're good when you buy this business, right? Restaurant owners, before you open more locations, stop. I've seen way too many owners go from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. I know, because I was once there myself. The difference in owning multiple locations is how you have to change, and if you don't make the shift, it'll take years to recover. I took my 3 biggest lessons and put them in a free ebook called the Multi-Unit Playbook, so you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Go to the link in the description below and get your free copy today. After that, we're talking about things like the transfer costs. So there might be, if it's a franchise, there's going to be transfer fees. Landlord will charge legal fees for the transfer documentation. There's other stuff. So obviously your goal when you're negotiating this is to make sure that you get the seller to pay as much as possible. So That's just one of those things. If there's commission for a business broker, obviously they should be paying the commission. So just try and get them to take on everything. And again, it's one of those situations where if they really are motivated to sell, you can get a steal of a deal in purchasing another business. But don't forget to think about those things as well. And don't just go, oh yeah, we'll just do half. No, I mean, if you can get them to take it on, why not? Right? It's whoever needs it more is going to lose in this scenario, right? Just make sure that's not you. And yes, so I did talk about this a little bit, but more of the motivated seller, if they really need to get out of there and they need to make it quick, then be prepared to make sure that the selling price reflects that. So when you're buying a business, those are just a few things that I would look at, because when I purchased the business, my very, very first one, I didn't look at financials. I didn't really think about the rent and the location. I mean, I thought the location was great. Turns out it wasn't that great in the wintertime. I didn't really look at the transfer fees. I'm pretty sure I probably paid most of them as far as that goes. I didn't even have a lawyer at the time. Oh, by the way, expect lawyer fees, usually like $5,000 to $10,000. That's pretty normal for, depending if they're doing like some of the negotiations for you and stuff like that. But yeah, so there can be a lot of that goes into it. Yeah. I think that there's just a lot of things that I miss that I would now look for that I didn't look for before. I just want to get the best deal possible, because once you have the best deal possible, then your profit potential is so much higher. And so I actually like buying existing businesses as a model way better than basically building from scratch. And I'll tell you why. And it's pretty simple, is that the leasehold improvements, a lot of the equipment's already there. So if you can buy a business that is either recently closed down, or you're just going to buy it and it's going to rebrand, you're going to turn it into something else, that's a big thing. And even if you're going to be making it the same brand as well. So if you're buying, say, a franchise or something like that, and you're keeping it the same, always make sure you advertise that it's under new management, so people will give you a fresh look, because oftentimes you don't want to carry on the legacy of the person that's selling it, especially if it was a bad legacy. So just want to think about that. Now, if you're building new, the reason I don't like this as much, because it's really expensive, because all of a sudden you are paying for the fit up for everything. Like, say you just get a brand new location and it is in a shell. You have to do all the plumbing, you have to do all the electrical, you have to do all the stuff to get it up. Then you have to buy all the new equipment, and you don't even know if the location is going to be great. And so I've done that 1, 2, 3 times. And in that, it's worked out in some cases and hasn't worked out in others. So it's just one of those things that it's more risky, because at the end of the day, for like most build outs, even for like a 1,200 square foot build out, I mean, you're into it sometimes for $300,000, $400,000. If they're small footprints. If you're talking about 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, man, you're into it for a lot of money. And that's a lot of money that comes out of your profit over the next 10 years. And that's what we have to understand, is that it costs a lot of money. So I don't like that model, having done it. What I love is being able to go into a place where the fit up's already done. You just have to do a few cosmetic tweaks. Most of the equipment's still there, and you just do a rebrand. So you can be in and out, $50,000, $100,000, boom, you're open. It is a much better way to do things. You're going to have to deal with some stuff down the line, like equipment failures, things like that. But you can get a much better deal in a lot of cases, because the reality is that the restaurant industry has a lot of failure because a lot of people don't know how to run a restaurant properly. And so if you are one of the ones who do, there's a lot of opportunity for people. So wanted to make sure that was clear. But let's talk about getting a new location, because what are the factors that you should consider when doing a new location? So the one thing that will trump all else is location. And so here's how I kind of assess the locations that I went into. In a lot of cases, I didn't do enough research, but these are the things that I look for now if I was going to do it again. And this is what has been successful for me when I've done it this way. Is the first thing that I like to look at is you want to be where the people already are, because it is easier to be where people already are. It's easier to get business from people who are already there versus making yourself a destination where people have to travel to. And so I grew up in a very small town, And what was so funny about it was that I talked to this owner. He actually owns like 100 restaurants right now, all throughout North America. So anyway, his name's Dwight. But basically, I remember chatting to him when I was first getting into the restaurant industry, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, a lot of people gave me flack when I opened up, I think he opened up a Pizza Hut and a Subway combination, and he opened it up right beside a McDonald's. And they were all saying, hey man, like, why would you do that? Like, don't you want to be further away from your competition? Isn't like McDonald's going to steal from your competition? And he told me two things, and he kind of laughed when he said it. And he's like, well, number one, they do a lot of market research, so wherever McDonald's is, it's going to have some traffic. But number two, if you make the entire area a destination for where people go, you're more likely to get the business by default. So think of it this way. If someone says, okay, I want to go to this specific place, but it's a 10-minute drive away, or if you're going out for lunch with a group of friends, or you're going out with your family or whatever, and people want to go to different places, like, oh, let's just go there because there's like 6 different options, and everyone can choose what they want to do, right? And so you just go there, and that's the hub for the food in that area. So just like be where the people are. And so that's one of the biggest things that I always like to do, is think about where are the people going to be already. And then the next thing I like to do is I always look at where your day parts are going to come from. So for me, in a quick service restaurant, I looked for a few things. I looked for lunch service was our primary driver. I know I needed to be in a place where there was offices around or people worked, because I needed to have a strong lunch. And then I also needed to be in an area where there could be residential traffic as well for the evening business. So I know I needed to have a good lunch business, a good dinner business. If I didn't have both of those, there was no point in even opening a location, because we'd never hit the sales we needed to make it make sense. But I also looked for those two, and then I looked for a third. I also looked for a third option. And so either that could be like, I knew I did a lot of catering. So am I by offices where I can do catering? Am I close enough to downtown that I can do catering? Can I do school lunches? Can I have breakfast? Am I downtown and I have a late night bar crowd that I can serve? Like, what is that third option? Because some places can make a go of it just on dinner service alone if you charge enough. But I'll tell you, most restaurants can't survive on one service alone. And so you have to look at your business and say, okay, how do I get the most revenue per square foot out of my business? And this is something we tell our clients all the time, is like, most people, they don't really get busy until say noon, but then people are there at 9 or 10 in the morning doing prep and doing things like that. Well, what could you do to add some money earlier on in that day? Could you do catering? Could you do lunches for places? Could you do to-go boxes? Like, who knows? Like, what could you do in that period or in your afternoon period or wherever to get some extra business? Because otherwise that's time you're paying rent, but there's no revenue coming in for it. So that's going to have a disproportional effect, because you're not going to pay more rent unless you have a percentage rent agreement, which I don't agree with. But you're not going to pay more rent if you grow your sales. So the more sales you can get per square foot, the more profit you're going to make at the end of the day, right? So that is the kind of message I want to make sure that you guys get, but that we tell our clients as well. So I always look for those three things. And if it didn't have the 3 things, I didn't go there. Another thing I would do is I would scope out competition that's in that area and see how they were doing. Can I beat the competition? Is the competition slow? Like, I remember just like sitting in my car outside of these restaurants where there was an opening, and I would just literally count the number of customers going in, going out, and I would say like, hey, like, I turned down a number of locations because I'm like, man, it's lunchtime. They should be packed right now, and they are not. So if they're not packed, what's the chances that I could be packed? I always looked for the places that were already packed and they weren't even that good. That, to me, was a winning recipe. So that's what I always looked for when I was looking for locations. Now, the other thing I was going to mention too, when it comes to rent as well, we need to make sure that rent will, for a quick service, to be no more than like 10-ish% of your anticipated sales volume. For full serve, ideally you want that to be a little bit less, like ideally under 6%, but like 8% max. Some people are under 4, which is great. So keep on doing that. You want your rent to be lower, because your rent will not get lower. The landlord's not going to get more generous. And you want to make sure that you can sustain that with the revenue you have, because it is extremely hard to go into a location that has extremely high rent and then make a profitable business from it. Even if it's a great location, if the rent's too high, you're going to be what's called house poor, right? You're going to be business poor, because you're just not going to be able to make enough money to make that make sense. So always just watch out for that, because that's one of the things. And once you're in a lease, it's hard to get out of it, right? So that's a piece of it. But when you are negotiating your leases and stuff like that, I always try to include, especially when we're talking about like a new build or something like that, what we would call like a tenant inducement, or basically where the landlord will pay you some money towards your fit up. It's something, some people don't ask for it. I would always ask for it. I would say, hey, we're going to be going and putting in a whole bunch of improvements to your place. Yeah, you need to pay for some of that. So on average, we were able to get 20, 30, 40,000 out of a build out paid back. So that was a great addition for us. So we definitely like that. And the other thing too, is the other thing I would look at when you're building a new location, always look out for the proximity of either existing locations of yours or similar types. Like if you're a pizza place, you don't necessarily want to go like side by side with a pizza place. You know what I mean? Unless you think you can do like that much better than them, you want to be in that area probably. But the reason I say this is because, especially with a franchise, if you're too close to another location of the same franchise, it's just going to be harder to get the amount of revenue that you need. And I say this because I opened up one location, my fourth one, too close to my third one, and it ended up cannibalizing the sales. So I ended up having both locations didn't do as well as what one did on its own. And that just became a recipe for negative profitability. So that's not something that you ever want to do. It took me a long time to fix that. So make sure that you're not too close in proximity. So location is such a big thing when building it out. And the other thing too, make sure you vet your contractors. Always expect at least a 30% delay. Whenever they tell you it's going to be done, just add 30% onto it, and you're more likely to be right at that point. And always expect that it's going to be 10% more expensive than they quote you on it. There's always going to be other things that happen. So you just want to be prepared for those things. But of the two models, I like to find existing businesses that already have a lot of that done, because it's less out of your pocket. You have a better chance of success simply because there's less costs associated with it. Because think of it this way, you're going to have to pay your rent, you're going to have to pay all that stuff, but then all of a sudden, if you're paying $5,000 in loan payments every month, if that could be $2,000 instead of $5,000, that's $3,000 extra room you have every month that's going to be in your pocket instead of going to the bank. So it's going to allow you to be much more successful. And that's kind of the model that I really think is good, especially right now, because there's a lot of buying opportunities out there. So if you are buying a restaurant, I hope that you take a look at this, and I just hope that you try and negotiate and get the best deal for you, but make sure you don't get screwed like I did on my very first restaurant. Yeah, that was not fun. Took me a lot of years to get out of that. Oh, actually, one other point on that note, my very first location, the landlord didn't renew my lease at the end of the 10 years. I was a good tenant, always paid my rent. Overall, everything was good. But our neighbor, who was the biggest tenant in the building, said, hey, we want that space. And the landlord was like, well, I got to keep the big tenant happy. So I had to then relocate and move my business elsewhere. And I had to pay all those fit up costs and stuff like that to basically redo it. So if you're buying an existing business, always make sure you have at least 10 years on the lease. And so you could be assuming a lease, but make sure they at least add at least 10 to 20 years. I prefer 20 as options to renew. So my favored term is a 5-year lease term with 3 5-year options to renew at your discretion. And so I like that better, simply because it gives you a lot of flexibility and the ability to leave if you need to, but also to stay so that you can make the max amount. Because even in your first 10 years, usually people are paying loan payments and stuff like that in their first 10 years. So at the end of the day, you're not making your full profit anyway in that first 10 years. So you need to be there 20 years to really make it worth it. So always make sure that's there, because that's something that happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to you, because it was really frustrating after spending 100 hours a week in this business for so many years to make it go, and then just have to relocate it. And anyway, by that time I had 3 other locations, but still was not a fun time. So I don't want that to happen to you. So that's something that I didn't think of when I purchased my first business. So hopefully you guys learned from this and are better equipped to handle some of these things. As always, let me know your questions. Would love to answer any specifics, and you can comment on YouTube and we'll take a look, but I would love to talk to you more about this. So guys, I hope it was valuable, and we'll see you on the next one.